Hello and welcome to this Unicorns video. My name is Ashley, and the topic of today's session is managing and implementing change within the workplace. Now, if you look at the playlist, you'll see that we did an overview of managing change a couple of months ago, and we thought it was about time for us to delve a little bit deeper into managing change. So, we're going to do this now in two parts. The first part's going to focus on the people management elements, and the second part is going to look more about the implementation process and managing people through that change as well. So, we're going to start with a couple of definitions, and Webster Webster's dictionary offers the following definitions. So, to make different in some way, so that might be to alter, um, to make radically different, so that might be to transform, to give a different position, course, or direction. So there's different ways to define change, and we're going to look at that in a little bit more detail moving forward. Firstly, I just want to talk about why organisations want to change. And I did touch upon this within the introduction to change video. So please have a little look at that if you want to see it in a little bit more detail. Usually, organizations change because they want to. They want to expand and grow. They want to um, make the organization and maybe the offices a little bit more comfortable with the staff. So think of changing the desks around, making um, getting better seats. Making a better communal area for everyone. They might need to change due to um, some sort of analysis of the company. It might be that um, it might even be that you've looked at your competitors and found that your competitors are providing a lower price for the same product. So it might be that there's a need there to change in order to stay competitive within the market. And then the area that is hard and painful for organisations when they're made to change, and often it's the case that they might not have the resources or the money, to make that change. So it can be hard, it can be painful. If you want to change, it's easier because you've really got, the will to want to do it. And usually if you want to change, you know that you've got the resources to be able to accommodate that change. But, when you're made to change, and you can be made to change because of external factors that are completely out of your realms of control. Consider, if you were to do a strategic analysis of the external environment, maybe you'd use a pestle. And if you haven't used a pestle before, it focuses on political, economical, social, legal, and environmental influences on an organisation. And you know, if new legislation comes out that means that you've got to change your whole process of something in your organisation, it's got to be done in order for you to, adhere to standards and regulation and the law. Um, but it can be difficult because you've got to try and find the time to make that change. And often it's the case that when people are made to change, they don't prepare properly, they don't plan properly, they don't allow people within the organisation to understand why there is a need, and why they are being made to change. And understanding, I believe, is one of the key things to leadership and management. If your team understand what and why they're doing something, the reasons behind it, then they're going to be more acceptable to whatever's happening, or that the change that's being implemented. So just bear that in mind. So what are the drivers for change? And I've given loads of examples. There's loads more examples of drivers for change. Just consider, successfully leading and managing change. It's not, it's not one skill, it's a range of skills. And I believe that all of them skills, they can be learned. It is it's necessary and it's important so that companies remain relevant, that and they continue to deliver viable solutions to, you know, their clients or the customer base. And, you know, it's important to recognize the need for change management. Employees might be resistant, since change change can sometimes be uncomfortable, especially when it's not expected as well. But there are drivers for change. There are things that make us want to change, need to change, made to change. And I've just provided some examples. I'd just like to point out that, some of the external drivers for change will also link in with internal. And, some of the internal will link to external, usually the other way around now. So let's just consider if you just found out, say, a couple of years ago, there was new data protection legislation that was, imposed on all organisations, and it was an external driver for change. So following on from that, um, our staff had to all do an online training course. Um, then we had to change policies. We had different procedures for the way that we marketed certain products, and everybody needed to be aware of what was actually going on within the organisation. So there was various meetings that taken place. So as you can see, and there might be legislation or international laws, politics, and agreements, for example, such as Brexit, that might um, impact on your human resources, and it might impact on you managing resources as well. It might be that, you know, you need somebody in with specialism in trading. It might be that you need to start recruiting, um, and advertising for a new member of staff based on the new international laws, politics, and agreements. It might be that you have decided to grow your business and it's your want, it's your vision for the company. And that might mean that, if you do want to grow your business and go global, you might need to then consider staff from different countries that speak different languages, that know their cultures, and that could impact on human resources. Consider as well when you are reviewing your competitors might be using a new software or new technology that really pushes you to invest in the new technology or software, so you're keeping up to date with you know with others within the market. So yeah, just remember that one can link in with another. So an external can link to an internal, and an internal can sometimes link to an external as well. So bear that in mind, drivers for change, what drives change. And remember that once you understand what has driven that change, share it with the team, communicate it with the team, and let them know, well, on, on completing a personal analysis, we have seen that new legislation is coming into place in 6 months. We want to be prepared. This is what we're going to have to do. Are you with me? Bringing the team along with you it's extremely important. So, as mentioned, I've mentioned the pestle analysis, analysing the external environment. In my eyes, a successful organisation should complete one of these whenever they've got a chance, really. The marketing team should be completing them quite regularly. Maybe the whole organisation completes it annually. Maybe there's one completed when strategy is being developed. So, just before strategic development, an in-depth strategic analysis. Can use all of these tools really for an in-depth strategic analysis. So, yeah, as mentioned, political, economical, social, technological, legal, and environmental factors that are external factors that can have an impact on your organization and can drive your organization having to change. Then the SWOT analysis focuses on the strengths, the weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. Opportunities and threats are usually external. So you might have, you know, it might be that the strengths of the organization is that you've got high level staff. A weakness might be that your IT, your internet is coming and going all the time, flickering in and out. You might have an opportunity to review different different suppliers, and there might be a threat that you are in an area where there isn't a satellite close by, or so it's reviewing situations from a whole. I love a SWOT. A SWOT can be done personally before you do a personal development plan. It's a really good reflective tool, but make sure when you are reflecting on something that you then use that information to analyze what you are actually reflecting upon. They can be done departmental, they can be done on team, they can be done, on a specific situation. Like if you were to, we undergoing a project, for example, and they can be done as a whole, as part of strategy development. And, the cosmic, not really used as much as the pestle and the SWOT. It looks at, analysing competitors, the organisation itself and the internal structure, suppliers, the market, intermediaries and customers as well. So I think it's a good one because it does look at internal, like external impacts on an organisation. But again, it's not really done that much. And usually the pestle and the SWOT are done side by side in order to be able to understand what needs to change, why it needs to change, and maybe just planning the future development of the organisation. So, looking more closely at different types of change, so there's different levels of change and how that impacts, and sort of maybe the threat levels for that type of change. So, if you've got like five really big changes happening in an organization, not really a good idea. If I'm honest with you, I was delivering manage level five management qualifications to six department managers in quite a big company a couple of years ago, and they were all working on the same unit, which was managing and implementing change, or it might have been leading innovation and change actually. And they all decided to implement changes within their department, which were quite big changes. I wouldn't say that they were metamorphosed, but they were quite radical changes within their organisation. And although that they shared and they communicated it really well to their team, they didn't really communicate it to the different departments within the organisation. And because some processes were changing and then processes were changing within the different departments, it caused quite a bit of uproar, and it was quite unsteady for a time. They all had a meeting following on from when they when they first understood what was going on, and yeah, they decided on which one. They'd done basically a priority list for the changes. So prior putting the changes that you are going to be implementing into a list of priorities is, it's quite a good idea to do. But let's talk about these in a little bit of detail. So incremental changes are typically, continuously improving driven. So an example might be that a company identifies customers that aren't happy with something. Um, Maybe something with like they're not happy with how the telephone calls are handled, and they change the process for answering the telephone calls to rectify and improve customer service and satisfaction. Now, obviously, with that change, there's things that link on from that. There might be customer service advisor training. There might be that you've updated the customer charter. It might be that you have changed the process. It might be that you've had to amend the induction or the employee handbook or whatever. So there is still some changes, but it's nothing that's crazily going to impact on the whole organisation. An annual change is one that takes place every year, really. And an example of that would be reviewing um, financial budgets or departmental budgets. Um, Step is, it's seen as the other two are like quite a low level, not really major. Um, but the step one is more significant. So, step change is incremental change that is implemented in phases and in steps. So, an example could be customer dissatisfaction, where the company's telephone call handling could be addressed by implementing several new processes or procedures in logical stages. So, it could be that, the first stage might be just to have a new script for how you start the phone call. See how that goes first. If you get good feedback from that, then you can go on to the next stage. So it is quite significant because it could be changing a whole process and procedure, but it will usually impact on the organisation. You will be able to see the change, and its impact usually quite drastically. So metamorphosis or major is very high, very significant, and it's change that radically transforms the way business is done. So an introduction of central call center to like another call center to handle all customer calls will be an example of a major change. Um, for us, we are introducing a short face-to-face course. So that's quite a radical and major change for us because we've always been distance learning. So there is a number of different ways an organisation can change. And I think if you understand the difference between the levels, and when I say threat level, I mean the impact to the organisation, and bearing in mind that the impact might be low on a department, but it might be quite significant for an individual. If you were to be changing the whole office around, for example, and that person's quite introverted, and you might not think it's a big deal. You might just think you're changing the office around just to be able to bring them a little bit closer so they can communicate more on certain things, or um, it might be just because you feel like you want to use a certain part of the office for something else. Then consider that it might be a low threat level to the organisation, but it's important to consider the people and their reactions and how they might respond to that change. Okay. So, another couple of changes just to be aware of. Developmental change, it's sort of like incremental change. It involves small changes in processes and procedures that give gradual improvements to ways of working and to give increased levels of performance. Now, these are usually happening all the time. You have a meeting, you think of a little change that can be done. You have another meeting, think of another little change that can be done. Even in relation to these live videos, every time we do a couple of them, we review them, we get feedback on them, and the media team have meetings about them. Small little changes are made just to improve them moving forward. And that's what we always want to do. Developmental change is necessary in business to help maintain um, the business's competitiveness and ultimately to make it look good, feel good, improve profitability. Um, you always want to continuously improve, really. Transitional change describes the period between movements from a relatively stable state to a new order. So the new order will provide a radically different way of doing business. Examples might include restructuring, downsizing, mergers, implementation of new production methodologies, or the introduction of completely new products, services. So you can here get, and it can be quite similar to metamorphosis in a way. Um, but you can get high levels of turbulence, so you really need to prepare the ground before you do consider transitional change as well. And because think about the employees, it's often that you might be able to see that they're feeling a little bit anxious and stressed because they know this change is coming. So transformational change, it involves radical change to the team, to the department, to the culture. It's wide reaching and leaves an organisation with totally new ways of operating. Often, transformational change and transitional change will be done simultaneously. The radical nature of transformational change is usually driven um, by the emergence of by the emergence of maybe like external influences like new technologies, changes in the supply of resources. I think quite a big example here is, when we had COVID, restaurants were like, what are we going to do? You know, they had to really, really think about how they were going to keep the businesses operating. And a lot of them went to delivery. Some of them even went to, you can stand outside and have a drink in the summer and, take away. It, that they had to consider the options if they weren't doing that already and others were, then how could they do it and, also stay competitive. So bear that one in mind because, it's happening more and more these days with, you know, so many things, so many, political factors, technological advances as well. Um, and, Brexit as well. So consider that one. Business turnaround is a term that can be used to describe a rapid or radical change to save a business that is on a trajectory to liquidation or failure. So often the alternative would be for the business to be put into liquidation. Business turnarounds usually involve drastic measures to return the business to a viable platform. So cutting costs, redundancies for the workforce, disposal of unnecessary assets, along with refinancing in different areas. They tend to be positive features, prominent features of business turnaround. So there is sometimes a need for that change. I'm sure a lot of organisations have had to go through that, which is sad, but you know, there's also a lot that are surviving at the moment. Business restructuring is um, it's a term that's used to describe a situation where a business seeks to become more profitable by changing the structures of the business. Structure in the context might include the business finances, ownership, the legal structures of the business or organization. It might be in relation to the operational function. It might be that they've gone into partnerships with another company. Um, so, so that's just giving you a bit of an overview of the different types of change. Consider how much planning needs to go into each, different methods of change, really, and how much needs to be communicated. If you are completely re-engineering, a business process, if you are doing a complete business restructure, communication is key. It's vital, and I mean to every single person that's involved. That might not just be the staff that you're looking after, maybe the stakeholders. It's really important to manage people's responses through the change process. So let's talk about the change process then. So there is a difference between change and the actual what's happening through the process of change. So we've got change and then we've got transition. So let's just focus on this. So change is an external event or situation that takes place. A new business strategy, change in management and operations, um, anything that I've just mentioned on the previous slide. Transition is the inner psychological process that people have to go through as they internalize and come to terms with the new situation that the change brings about. So, this transitioning process is, essential to get right because it can really impact on the organizational culture, team morale, individuals' experience. You might end up with really high staff retention if you're not managing the transitional process right. So consider what you need to be thinking about, okay, when you're looking at the difference between change and transition. So change, it is the external event or situation, and bear that in mind, or the internal situation, sorry. But change will only be successful if managers and leaders and organizations address the transition that people are experiencing through change. Supporting people through the transition rather than pushing forwards without communicating anything. It's essential for the change to be successful, to go as planned, and the key to capitalising on opportunities for innovation and creating um, organisations' resilience to change as well, making sure that they're adaptable, making sure that they are agile, making sure that they're fine with change. So there's three different stages of the transition process, and this is it's based around a specific model. So the bridges transition model, it helps organizations and individuals within that organization to understand and more effectively manage and work through the personal and the human side of change. So I like this model because it identifies the three stages of the experiences during the stage. And it's quite funny because, the first one is endings and it looks at, what currently is. Then there's the neutral zone. And, that's, them getting prepared and getting ready for change. And the new beginnings, um, which is with them sort of getting to grips with it. So this was developed by William Bridges, and it is really, really good to be able to consider these three stages. So let me just look at them in a little bit more detail. So yeah, we start with endings, which is quite unusual. But transition does start with endings. It's the first stage of transition. It begins when people identify that they are losing and learn how to manage their losses. And it might not be, major losses, but the, the understanding that something's got to give up and they're part of it. They determine what is over, what's being left behind, and what they are going to keep or what they will keep. And, you know, at this section, it could be um, that your office is expanding. Then you've got, it's quite a radical change, and you're being told that you're moving offices because maybe you're being promoted. So it might be that, the endings you're dealing with, the people that you're going to leave behind, and that, the processors, team members, and, the location. But there's more to it than that. There's a lot that people can leave behind when they are going through the transitional process. And then the next, so sorry, here's where learners, employees, people. Here's where people identify losses and learn to manage them, and learn to, get a grip of them really. The next section is the neutral zone. So this is the second step of the transition, and it comes after letting go. The neutral zone is, it's an important step to consider. People go through an in-between time when the old is gone, but the new isn't fully operational. It is when the critical psychological realignments and repatternings take place. It's at the core of the transition process, really. It's the time when you should really be thinking about. It's the time when old reality and a sense of identity, um, is sort of taken over by the new. People are creating new processes and learning the new ways of working or the new roles. And there might be a bit of confusion here. There might be some distress. So this is the part where, as a leader and manager, you need to be supporting the staff. Um, you need to be considering how you can support them at this stage. So yeah, people might get stressed out. People might look worried. People might not know where they are. what's going on. So, try and be clear, communicate well at this point. And then new beginnings, which, it involves new understandings, maybe new values and attitudes and beliefs towards specific situations. Um, the marked by this stage is marked by a release of energy in that new direction. Um, there's also sometimes like an expression of a fresh identity. So well managed transitions allow people to establish, new roles, new responsibilities with an understanding of their purpose, um, and also the part that they play and how they contribute and participate, and how they can participate effectively, really. As a result, they feel, some people might feel, if they've gone through this transitional process, wow, they might feel reorientated into the new implemented change. They might feel renewed, and confident about the new process. Um, and thinking about transitional management or transition management, even you can also break that down into stages as well. Let me just focus on the six stages, but let's just talk about the first one. So, transition management in organizations, it addresses inner psychological process. It addresses people and their experiences through change. And, if you do this successfully, and, follow these steps if you want, or consider something around these steps, it's more than likely that the change will be implemented. It will stick. It will fall into policy. People will be, happy with the change. And people will be happy to make changes in the future as well. So the first step looks at, people, communicating with the organisation about why the change is needed. And let's go back a couple of slides. Tell them what the driver for change is. Let them know exactly why it needs to happen before you even implement them and tell them the details about what's going to happen. Make sure you've got all the information from all that's affected by the change, um, to understand what the impact on them is. And sometimes it's good to send out like a feedback questionnaire to just, ask them how you feeling in relation to this at this moment in time before it's going to change, and maybe do it at the end. Once the change you've implemented is, just to see, if you've gained somewhat of a perspective. But gaining their investment in the outcomes, that's what this is. You're getting their ideas, you're getting their thoughts. Sometimes you might want to do an audit of the organisation's transition readiness. So, are they ready for change? Have you got the resources? Have you got the equipment? Have you got the people? Um, have you got the time? You know, make sure that all of them are in place. And, if you're made to change, you might not be able to ensure that. You might not be able, it might come out as really low and there's no way you're ready for it, but it still needs to happen. So you've got to find a way. Or educating the different managers and department heads, the leaders, about how that change will affect the people within their team, um, or within their departments. It's a great way to manage the transition effectively. Always, consider when you're going through this process, to monitor the progress of the individuals as they go through the three stages of transition. So as they go through the endings, the neutral zone, the new beginnings, and you'll usually know when that is. It might just be that you do a couple of extra one-to-ones, or you time them one-to-ones, or informative little feedback catch-ups or whatever, or might be like meetings when you're going through each phase. But monitor and support the people through each step, and also help the individuals and the people that are going through the change and the transition process to understand how they can input, how their insight might work well for this change, how they can contribute to it, and make sure that you are defining their role within it. Even if they're completely outside it, if it's going to be impacting them, well, it is going to impact you, but then you can maybe give me some feedback, or you might be able to help at this stage in order to be able for it to be effective. So consider all of these stages, and also remember the difference between change and transition. Okay. So the basic principles of um, change management can be split into five sections. And it is a process. Change management is a process and it helps organizations successfully implement changes. And these five changes can help make that transition smoother. So the principles are planning. So, consider what planning is key. If anyone has watched any of my videos in the past, you'll know that for me, um, planning is what gets you through, gives you the goal, gives you something to work towards. And it might be that, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. And there might be that there's a goal for why you're changing. It might be to improve the performance management process within the organization by 2024. And it might be that you change the whole performance management process. It might be that you've gone from having appraisals every year to having one-to-ones every month. It might be that you are now measuring everybody's performance based on key performance indicators, working towards the department or the organisation's goal. So planning is the most important aspect of change management. And in this unit, managing and implementing change, and in a couple of the change management units on innovation and change in the projects, there's so many units that link to change management within the ILM level 3 and level 5 qualification frameworks. But consider, you know if you've got a good plan to follow with smart objectives that are achievable and realistic, and everyone knows what they've got to do in order to achieve it, how much easier is it going to be? you know It's it is key to the success. A good plan will help ensure that the change is implemented smoothly and effectively. A change management plan, it should include, the goal, smart objectives, timeline, milestones, designated responsible people, designated accountable people. Um, you know, and I'm going to talk about the planning and implementation on the next session in loads more detail because there is a lot to it. But yeah, a good plan, good implementation plan can be just emails out to everybody. And everyone should really know what they're doing and what their part is and how they need to go about achieving each section in order to be able um, to move forward. There's a few things to bear in mind at this point when planning for change. Um, First, it's important to engage and secure support from the top management. So that might mean that you put a proposal in for change, for example, and you need that to be approved, to be approved before you actually go about putting together a change implementation plan. So this will help to ensure that the change project has the money and the time, the resources, the people it needs in order to be successful. So if you're saying X, Y, and Z, this person, that person needs to do X, Y, and Z at this time, by this time. Well, how do you know if it's realistic if you haven't spoken to the people on top and they've authorised them to leave their primary tasks for the day or for the week or whatever is needed? Initially, think about what success would look like. So, what goals need to be achieved? How would you predict and assess the impacts of the change? Things like that need to be asked when you are planning. You might want to manage risks as well. So you might want to think about what will happen if this happens, what will happen if this happens, and so on and so forth. By answering the questions, you can create a detailed plan that will ensure a successful change management process and a vision for change as well. So I'll go into that in a lot more detail. The next step is about communicating with all stakeholders throughout the process. Communication is the second, but to me, probably one of the most important principles of change management. If you've got the best plan in the world, but you don't communicate it to the right people who are being impacted or part of it, what's the point? So Understanding that throughout the whole process, it's critical to keep stakeholders informed of the plans. And you might want to do a stakeholder matrix to understand who needs to be communicated at what point through the change process, especially if it's a radical change, transformational change, or a major change. So consider that by maintaining open communications, organizations can ensure that everyone is on the same page, and that any concerns are addressed in a timely manner. And, it might be, oh, well, they haven't done that because there was a problem there, but that hasn't been communicated back to them. Well, that date hasn't changed because of that. Could cause really bad bottlenecks in your planning if you're not communicating all the time. It's critical, and it's critical that all of the information that you are communicating is clear, relevant, it's easy for people to understand. So, there's no point in, you know, somebody sending me a data report with all mad symbols on because I wouldn't understand it. Make sure that the communication that you are sending to whatever stakeholder, whether it's the employees, the shareholders, the investors, whatever, um, that you are making sure that they understand the information that is being communicated to them. So it might be converting data to information and presenting it in a meeting, for example. So the next step is involvement. And this is, it follows on really from communication, but it's about involving people in the process. If you involve people in the process, you're going to have more buy-in, less retaliation or resilience. Not resilience, retaliation or resistance to the change. And again, if you're involving people, they'll become resilient to the change because they're there with you as it's going on. So it can be difficult for people. So it is important for them to be involved as much in the process as problem. As possible. Um, yeah, it involves change does involve risk, and it's important to manage that risk. And managing the risk, by involving people that are going to be affected by it. Um, they will let you know if there's any issues, problems, or any risks that are going to happen, and that they'll be more open to communicating them problems, issues, or risks if they are involved in it. So provides employees with the information about the changes that are happening, give them a chance to provide feedback and share their concerns, and involve them in the implementation process as much as possible. Like I always find that if I'm doing an implementation plan for something, I'll communicate what's going to be happening in a meeting, but I won't mark dates down for completion of things by people unless I've spoken to them about it and I've got their involvement and I've said, okay, this needs to be done by that. This needs to be done in order for that to be done. What date do you think you can realistically do that by? And you'll know it's realistic and achievable, and they'll know how it's going to be measured as well. Training and support is obviously important through changes because if people lack knowledge and skill um, to actually do something or be involved, it can cause major problems. They need to build their capacity to adopt change. Every change initiative demands a new skills or updated knowledge. Um, it might be that there might be a slight change to the roles and responsibilities that they need to be aware of. It might be that they need to uh, learn something new. It might be that there's a trainer that comes in and supports them through a new software that's being implemented within the organisation. But specialized training and support programs, can be made available through change. And it might be that you might laugh at this, but there is such thing in big organizations as change champions. So people that are just there to support people through change. There's people that basically drive that change forward to make sure everyone's still got the motivation and the positivity to drive the change on. So you might want to say, right, okay, I'm the project lead in relation to this change um, management plan and process, but I do want to appoint X, Y, and Z as change champions to drive this forward. Then, the last stage is measuring progress and success. Really, really important. So, measuring progress and success, it is the final principle of change management, and it's important to document what went well, what didn't. You might want to do, an evaluation of the change management project, just to see what went well, what didn't, what you might improve on next time. Um, it might be that you used a specific technique. Um, it might be that you communicated in a specific way. It might be that you did X, Y, and Z. You involved this person or that person. But maybe next time that you wouldn't really need to. You might just need to drop them an email when it's done. So just bear in mind that evaluating what has happened is really important. But make sure that you do document them. Make sure that you share them with others as well. So involve everybody. You might want to send that valuation report out to everybody. But also remember that organisations that successfully implement changes should they should be sharing that with the staff. They should be saying, you've done really well there. We've just implemented that change. We've just changed that process. We've just um, completely restructured the organisation or the office or whatever. And it's been a success. It's gone really well. Yay. You know, so make sure and, it might even be the case that you want to reward success if you get a good return of investment for the change that's being implemented. So, yeah, they're the five principles. Now, I've just mentioned to you about communication, and that I believe it's probably one of the most important steps of managing people through change. And, you know, there is such thing as change communication, and Wheel and Betty and Somerville, who are, drivers and leading professionals in their field, they define change communication as a regular two-way communication specifically about change initiative, its implementation, related successes, challenges, and their resolution. Okay, so think about that as we're moving forward in the next couple of slides. Okay, so communication and change management. So there are a couple of different models, and I did touch upon them on the introduction and the overview of change management. But the most popular change management models, the heart of them, right in the center of them, is communication. The models that have been developed and formulated for years and techniques that have been followed, including Kotter's 8-step model, which it looks at the defreezing the existing culture, doesn't it? So that's like step 1 to 4, um, and it points to regular communication through regularly communicating vision. So the first one's like establish a sense of urgency, form a powerful coalition, create a vision, communicate that vision. So step 3 and 4 is about communicate. It's about understanding the vision and then communicating that vision. So that's that's a strong point for that. And when you look at ACTAR, their model that stands for awareness, desire, knowledge, ability, and reinforcement. It gives importance to effective communication by saying that every employee must be fully aware about the changes. They must have a clear understanding that why that understanding of why the change is necessary, what change is going to achieve, and how change will be implemented. The basic level of awareness is it's the first building block to change management, and it's understanding not only the driver for change, but it's understanding um, the reasons, what do you want to achieve? What are we going to get out of this? So people, leaders, managers, promoters who use the best communication strategies can better articulate the why, the what, and the so what of the change, increasing the increasing like the likelihood that employees will understand and engage in the different necessary behaviours for success, really. And well, Lewin's model, it also relies on strong communication in each of the three steps. Um, looking at the unfreeze change, and then the freeze of the change process. So sorry, unfreeze, change, refreeze. Um, Communication is all the way through that model. So have a little look, do a little bit of research on each of the models, when you are going to be completing this assignment, and consider where the people come into it, where the communication comes into it, and also consider at what point is the transition taking place as well. So why communicate? What's the importance? What is the importance of communicating through change? You will build an effective team. The team will be effective. It's a team who deliver change. One of the key factors behind successful implementation of change is how team is built, how team members interact and collaborate with one another. So bear that in mind, and incorporating change communication strategies will go a long way towards creating good team morale, team effectiveness. Change communication, it contributes to boosting morale and motivation, and the motivation of the individuals and the team members, which result in productivity and, happier workforce, which everybody wants, don't they? So the team's voices being heard, just consider that employee satisfaction is heavily dependent on how their voice is heard, whether it's regarding a suggestion they have had or a complaint they've had to make. In the change process, employees are afraid of the outcome of change, and sometimes they can be in denial or a state of shock. Oh my God, that's not happening. Why? Why is that happening? Um, Therefore, it's particularly important that employees, they feedback and they feel like they can feedback as well. So it can be addressed through, as I said before, maybe changing the one-to-one schedule, maybe just building a two-way communication process, maybe just actively listening to what they've got to say, and showing that through um full appreciation of what they're saying. Um so you know listening to the voices and actively listening will not only overcome um resistance to change, but it'll also gain more supporters of the change project. Then, innovation and knowledge, if it's shared, employees are significantly more likely to contribute um, and be happy to contribute, and, you know, can sometimes get recognition for contributing as well. It's important to create a space where they don't feel like they're being criticized or ridiculed, or that they're being ignored, but a space that allows for innovative thinking. And then, when we look at successful management or leadership, change leaders or managers who are good communicators are better, basically. The better managers, the better leaders, they listen more, they show more support, that they're usually happier within their role. Strong communication is more than just the ability to speak to people. It's about empowering them to speak to another, to open up and give their ideas, to give their input, and the strong communication channels during change. It's key to the success of a change being implemented. So, in the next session, we are going to be talking about implementation. So, what is a change management plan? It provides an outline of activities, actions, objectives, goals that you want to achieve through the implementation of the plan. And a well put together change management plan, it's a strategic tool, and it serves as a roadmap to achieve the aim, objectives, or the goal of the change plan. So what I want you to consider going away from this is, have you ever been involved in change management planning? If not, have you ever seen a change management plan, an implementation plan, maybe a project plan? Um, just consider what's included in it, and hopefully you will tune in to our next session, which is about implementing. So, formulating the change management plan, implementing the change management plan, and at what stages you should be considering the people that are involved. Thank you for watching today. I really do hope that this has helped. And hopefully you'll tune into part two. That'll be coming up soon. Thanks again. Bye.